the important part of coaching and working on yourself, period, even without coaching, just working on these things, is learning how to recognize your barriers, step back and look at them, make sure you're safe, and then find a strategy. So the strategy is part of the process, but it's not the process. And if we lose the process in there, the strategies don't mean anything. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the ADHD Eavesdrop, where you can be a butterfly on the wall and listen in on my conversations. Guess what? We got Cheryl Dics back today, and we have a really great topic for you. I'm going to talk to Cheryl about some things. Cheryl, you would not believe what happened at work today. Okay, I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm so frustrated. I had a project that was due 2 days ago. Boss comes to me today and says, "Where's the project? Why isn't it done?" Like, I haven't even tried to get the project done. Like, just totally accusing me of not even giving an effort. I used to be able to focus on stuff that I didn't really want to focus on if I just had the right music playing and a cup of tea sitting next to me. I have the music playing, I have the tea sitting next to me, and nothing's happening. I can't focus. Everything I'm trying isn't working all of a sudden. Like, everything that worked before doesn't work anymore. Let's talk about what happens in that moment. And that is what Cheryl and I are going to focus on today, is when you hit that wall and something happens and you can't focus anymore, or you can't do what it is that you have been able to do in the past, and suddenly it seems really difficult. We're going to turn these moments into triumphs rather than failures and defeats. So, Cheryl, welcome back. I'm really excited to talk about this one because we're going to go through and you're going to kind of do a little bit of coaching with me to work through this scenario. And in the process, hopefully, our listeners will be able to pick up some good tips and information. So, welcome back.
Hi, so good to see you. It's been a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool. I love that. Your story was brilliant because I went through an emotional response. I'm like, oh, she's so frustrated and it used to work. It doesn't work. The tea, I know that scenario where I've like, oh, everything's perfect and I can't get it done. The paralysis sort of takes over and hearing that sort of frustration. And I agree. We can take these moments and make triumph versus defeat and failure. And that's what's really cool. So we're going to dive into this a little bit. So we're going to use this event to kind of just take a look of what's going on underneath that. Is that going to be okay?
Absolutely. Uh-huh.
But I am going to ask you to trust me a little bit and be vulnerable and a little internal work. Take a look inside and see what's there. Also, looking at some of the tools that you've developed and established all this time to cope and make your tasks happen for you. And like you said, it's not working. So let's actually figure out in this moment what's not working. And looking at this tool worked up to this point, but we're all like little onions and we peeling off our layers. So I always try to tell people if it's not working, that is a victory because your body and your mind just saying, I want to know more. I need more opportunities. So look at it as an opportunity. Interesting story. Boss is giving you the gears. So that's something that's outside of you. So when someone treats you in a way or confronts you or may feel like criticism, what did that do for you?
Well, in that situation, absolutely, defensiveness, a feeling of, excuse me, frustration, because I know that I've been trying to work on this, a feeling of not being understood. And even when trying to explain it to my boss, he still didn't get the project done. He doesn't care why, right? So RSD kicks in really bad because all of a sudden I am being rejected in a major way. Not perceived, but for real. He's rejecting my job. So I would say that RSD is a big factor during
Mhm.
a situation like this. But besides that, it's anger at myself because I'm doing my strategies and they're not working. And so I get angry with myself because it's like, you're not doing it. You've got your strategies in place, but you're not doing it. You're not doing it. And it makes me feel again like I'm not enough.
And when you feel that, what emotion does all of this activate underneath the anger?
So if we take it deeper, I would say at the base of it, because one of my values is security and safety. One of my high values is safety and security. If I can't get myself to do the things I need to do, and if I can't have my strategies working for me, I could lose job security. And that's frightening,
When you welcome the fear, what are you afraid of?
losing my job,
What else?
not being good enough to keep my job.
And it's going to have fear of security. What are you going to lose?
I'm going to lose the money and I need that to live on. Yeah.
And you wonder why the strategy's not working.
Yeah, I'm in a fear-based situation, aren't
You are.
I?
So you have a RSD going on, some intensity, frustration, and anger, not feeling heard or seen by them. And then you're not feeling heard and seen by yourself. And the overwhelm's here. And now fear shows up, and anger shows up, and maybe some self-criticism, which is also going to fuel the RSD. So when the RSD is now taking over, does the project even matter right now? In
At that
this
at
moment?
that point, no.
There's no more project, right?
Mm-mm.
So this is the tool. We pause right here. Take a pause, take a really deep breath. And are you safe in this moment?
I am safe in this moment.
Are you in immediate danger?
Right now, no.
No. So can we talk about it and explore what's here, right now?
Absolutely.
And give yourself permission to release all of that so we can be with Janine.
Yes.
Awesome. Take another deep breath. So lots happened there. So physically, mentally, emotionally, and the spirit of Janine gets impacted by an event. And in this case, it was the project wasn't done on time. You would like to have that project done on time, but the skills to get the project didn't work. So you have the tea, you have the music. Can you put yourself in that moment at the desk, the project's on the screen, your tea and music's going? What's here now? Where's the block? Check yourself mentally, check your thoughts. Emotionally, do you need more information? Do you not know what the next step is? Are you confused?
It's
Comfortable.
tedious.
Mm. So
It's
when tedious,
boring. I don't want to do it because it's not interesting really to me.
so I want you to add boring. What does boring, what emotion does that bring up when it comes to your job and your position?
Hmm. Like I don't want to be here.
You want to be
I,
somewhere else, right?
yeah, someplace interesting, doing something fun. And
Would
really, when I
what?
think about it, that's mostly what I'm thinking about when I'm trying to do that project.
Yeah, yeah. So can you maybe spend a few minutes just visualizing something else you could be doing? What is something more interesting than this project?
Anything, but we'll pick something specific. Definitely doing something creative like art,
Good. So when you do creative art, how do you feel?
relaxed.
Hmm. Can you welcome that?
Hmm.
Feel relaxed. Imagine yourself doing your artwork, being creative, letting whatever come out of you the way it does. And what emotion does that bring up?
Just being.
Yeah, being, yeah.
And I heard something the other day, and I'm just gonna throw this in here. I heard somebody say, stop being a human doing and go back to being a human being. And I was like,
Hmm.
yeah.
So the project is a human doer.
Hmm.
The creative side is the human being. How can you combine the two? How do you bring them both back into balance where you can be creative, still do what you need to do without it being all or nothing, all good or all bad?
I'm trying to think of a way to make the project more creative,
Yeah.
but it's pretty specific to what I have to do. So I'm trying to figure out perhaps giving myself time during the day to do something creative, like so step away from the project for 5 minutes and draw or do something creative for myself to break it up.
Mhm.
Um, maybe setting time and building that in.
Yeah. So as you create a drawing, let's say, and you draw for 5 minutes, but you don't finish it, and you really want to finish it, welcome that urgency, that desire to be more creative, but also committing to a half an hour in this project. And then you can get back to what you're passionate about. Are you going to work really hard for 25 minutes so that you can maybe jump back into that art project?
Absolutely.
And what
And
comes up
I'm
for you?
sitting here thinking about what I could draw. Yeah, I could draw things that would like get my frustration out.
Mhm. Yeah.
Like really dive into what it is I'm drawing, not just draw a picture, but actually, spend a few minutes reflecting on uh what I'm drawing in this situation, about this situation.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. How does that affect the RSD?
I think the only thing really there is getting that project done is going
Yeah.
to help that RSD because I know he's right. I should have had the project done. So I need to get the project done and I need to do whatever I can to get there. So the rejection being real, not, and knowing, because like I always say with RSD, take time, you look around, what are the facts? Are you really being rejected? In this case, yes, and with good reason, right? So I think by setting up my strategies and getting myself moving on the project, I think that's what's going to help with the RSD is because once I have that project turned in, the rejection will disappear to me.
So be with the rejection, the plan, the negotiation of how you're going to make it happen. Does it feel personal or about you or who you are?
No, it's just a plan to get our report done.
When you first started our conversation, did that RSD feel personal about you or who you were?
Oh, absolutely.
So can you see how when we feel it's personal and it's an attack, the paralysis can kick in because we really feel it's about us. But when you pause and look at things mentally, emotionally, physically, and allow yourself as a spirit to observe what's actually here right now, all that just disappeared, didn't it?
Hmm.
You're able to look at, I like to say, the forest amongst the trees. We get out of all these trees of reasons why we might not be good enough, or reasons why fear can be here, or reasons why anger can be here, or self-doubt, or self-loathing. And then that rejection kicks in, and now there's a whole bunch of stories that are going to pop up. But when we kind of separate ourselves a little bit and observe, it all falls away. And you can have the courage because you gave yourself permission to be safe. You're not in immediate danger and allowed yourself to look at what really is here.
And that seems so simple,
Mm.
but it's so importantly intense.
Yes, because as we know, the ADHD brain has 50,000 stories going on all at once. So this is allowing you to break down those stories into categories, just mental, be with a mental story, all the stuff that's being said. physically, what physically is going on. The mind can't activate when you're thinking physically. Emotionally, when we feel those emotions of frustration and anger and fear, those other things slow down. So as we put the brakes on the brain and acknowledge that we're going to pause and allow our spirit, who we are, to run the show, all that has to stop. Then you can see. But we get lost in the push, the pull, the all over the place, wherever the mind wants to go. Don't think about blue elephants. It's my favorite saying. Don't think about blue elephants.
All I'm thinking about is blue elephants.
All you're thinking about is blue elephants. So when I ask you to observe Janine and all of the story, you are the blue elephant. All of that loses energy because you are focused on this. You can make good choices, good decisions that are good for you. Maybe not necessarily good for the itty bitty shitty committee.
Which we love so much, but
I love them.
we do love the committee now because of our committee meetings.
I
But
mean, you can hear that in another podcast.
yeah, right. I'll try to make sure I mark that. Um, you said something really well, you've said a lot of important things, but it's something that I kind of latched on to. When we reach this point and we realize everything's not working, stepping back as the observer, it's the same thing as, say you're in a basketball game. You're playing in the basketball game, right? And everything's moving really fast and everything is happening all around you. But if you step back into that observer role and you become the observer, you're able to see that whole team, the whole picture, the whole court, everything that's going on. And I think a lot of times we get stuck in that player mode.
Be instead of, like you said, being that player, be the armchair quarterback, be the guy sitting at home, seeing all the plays play out, hearing the commentary about what's happening, and getting all of this information that that player is not privy to, and doing that in your own life. And just like I said, become the forest, not the trees.
Right.
Get out of the trees, because when you're lost in the trees, every tree looks the same and it becomes overwhelming. Overwhelm always creates two emotions, fear and anger. When fear and anger are here, now we're going down the rabbit hole and it takes us a while to get out. So feel overwhelmed, feeling fear or anger, pause.
How do we remember to pause? Because we get really
Practice.
wrapped up in that emotion sometimes.
Practice.
Practice.
Everything we do in life is a practice, right?
Yeah.
We get better at things because we practice. You know, we didn't learn how to walk in a day. We didn't just get up and get going. We had to fall a bunch of times. We had to get up. People had to encourage us. It took practice. It took practice to run. We don't run a marathon in a day. You got to run a little bit more each and every day. So mindfulness, that's what this is. A mindfulness practice is to say, I matter, I'm valuable, and I'm important. So I'm going to give myself some attention so that I can get out of the trees, see the forest, so I can live my best life. But always remember, when things stop working, you're growing because your body says, I want more. I can do more. I used to be able to do this and now I can do more, but I need more skill.
And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that when something like that happens and you run into that wall, first of all, you have to identify the fact that you've actually run into a little bit of a wall or a barrier there. And that's that pause. Let me step back. And then you have to examine the barrier, right? And figure out, how do we get around it, over it, or through it?
Yeah. And
And
exploring, like in your case, you were bored, but did you know that coming into the conversation?
and I want to point out to the listeners right now that this is an imaginary situation that could easily happen to anybody. But when we came into this was not scripted.
Mm-hmm.
Those solutions and what we worked through were very real for me. I had to think, how would I respond? But what we did next, once we identified the barrier and once we examined the situation, we grew. And it happened so naturally. I came up with another strategy, right? You
You
helped
did.
me. You said, well, what do you like to do? How do you integrate that? And I grew in that moment. How could I do something that would bring that in?
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you, as a person who doesn't have a coach sitting over your shoulder all the time?
Well, you do, but that's another conversation.
Right, because once you've been coached for a while, you do. You get a little coach that sits right there on your shoulder, and you don't really need a coach anymore, which is great. But, and I want to work myself out of a job. I want people to be able to coach themselves through these
For sure.
situations. So, building a new strategy to get around that. What happens when I hit another roadblock and that stops working for me? What happens when I hit that roadblock again? I grow again,
Yeah.
right?
And how do you do that? You pause.
You pause, you examine the situation, you come up with a new strategy or skill, and you grow.
Yeah, and examining the situation is as the observer, stepping away from the chaos that we can create very quickly. So, as the observer, looking at you as a body and a mind and sitting in your office and just checking in, am I physically safe? Yeah. Am I in immediate danger? No. Can I give myself permission to examine, explore, observe, come out of yourself and go, okay, what is actually here right now?
When you say that, establishing that should be part of your process too. So I would say, identifying your barrier, making sure you're safe in your environment, and then be able to go in and do the observation. Because if you were in physical danger, you probably wouldn't want to take time to be observing.
But here's also
But
a very strong point. When you're in physical danger, there is no thinking, there's only action.
right.
We only think and have emotions about it after the fact. So if we have emotions or intensity, the chances of us being in immediate danger are pretty much zero. But sometimes we have to call that out.
Yeah. And name it and say, I am safe right now.
Mhm.
I am not in danger. And that gives me permission, gives me the opportunity to say, okay, I'm in a safe setting. I can step back from this situation for a second. And I just wanted to emphasize that because I think sometimes we feel like when we're in that situation, that situation is all there is. In that, and you do feel like you are in danger. Like when I think about if I was in that situation and I think about it and I get all gooey icky about it because I can place myself there and I know that I would feel like I was in danger. I would feel fear for losing my job or getting in trouble or getting written up. And I would have to really talk to myself about right now, in this moment, are you safe? Are you in any danger? And if I'm able to say I'm safe and I'm not in any danger, then I should be stepping back, right?
Have that permission to step back,
Yes. And
step out
I
of it.
think that is a very difficult thing for a lot of people to do in that situation because they're so emotionally
Mhm.
in it.
And I like to tell people I'm all about acronyms. I used to be a first responder. And fear is a really great acronym, FEAR. So fear is, I'll use the nice version, forget it and run, or face it and recover. So when we face it, step back and observe, we realize there's nothing to be afraid of. But when we forget it and run, it fuels the fear, it fuels the intensity, it allows the story to get bigger. So we have a choice to make here. Are we going to face it or are we going to run from it?
And we've talked about the buffalo and the cow before.
Yeah. Remind me of that story because I love it. It just really grounds me every time you tell it.
So the cow and the buffalo, when they're on the plains and they see a storm coming in and had there, that there's a storm coming, the cows will turn and run the opposite direction and try to get away from the storm. But the storm catches up with them inevitably, and they end up running in the storm for a much longer time because they're running with it. Where the buffalo, when they see the storm coming, they turn directly into that storm and they run directly into it and come out the other side much faster than those cows do. I
Mhm.
choose to be the buffalo.
And right there's the empowerment moment. I choose. I make a decision.
Mhm.
And that's why the pause is so valuable, because you give yourself permission to matter, to have an opinion, to grow, to say, what I'm doing doesn't work anymore. I need a new strategy, and I'm willing to do the work. Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you.
What do you
They're
take away from this experience? The whole experience from walking into, you're never going to believe this, to how you feel in this moment.
empowered.
Hmm.
And I think also that was kind of what I was going for before, is that moving your mental self from point A to point B doesn't have to be super complicated, because what we're talking about here is a simple concept. It's not easy, though.
You can get to, I always try to say, what's the trigger? What's the trigger? What's the trigger?
Mhm.
Because the trigger is what, it's like cause and effect, right? I'm an alcoholic, but I'm not an alcoholic unless I take the first drink. What happens in this moment when you take the first drink? What would cause, like, that's the effect, right? The effect is I drink and blow my life up. What got me here, right? That's the trigger. So in this case, the trigger is you're bored,
Yeah.
and then you took the drink, and then your life blew up over here. Now you have to process all of this when really none of this is real. What's actually here is the moment just before you took the drink.
Yeah. And what's actually in that scenario, what's actually there is I'm bored.
Just bored.
Just bored.
You have a lot of pressure behind the boredom. Financial pressure, security pressure, providing pressure, right? All of these things of what this job provides you in your life,
Mhm.
but you're bored to death.
Yeah. And when we start talking about like strategies, like the strategy that I came up with literally was spontaneous about,
Mhm.
drawing the pictures and stuff like that. But I was thinking, in that situation, I think that for me, that would be really helpful, because I could draw my frustrations. I could, or draw something uplifting to make me feel like, get some dopamine going, whatever. But the strategies, and I tell people this all the time, the strategies aren't what's important. They make us be able to live our lives better. They make us, the important part of coaching and working on yourself, period, even without coaching, just working on these things, is learning how to recognize your barriers, step back and look at them, make sure you're safe, and then find a strategy. So the strategy is part of the process, but it's not the process. And if we lose the process in there, the strategies don't mean anything.
True. And I think really key is pausing. The word pause is permission to shut off the system, shut it down for a second. We're
Mhm.
gonna, like, when you go to a stoplight in your car and the engine stops, or they do that in Canada. Our vehicles are designed now that if you idle, your engine actually will shut down.
Oh,
And then as soon
we
as you
have
let go of the
some of
brake,
those here, but I no,
our car will start back up. So it's kind of like that. The vehicle's pausing, right? So that pause is kind of like, that's like it's like a gift you give yourself
Mhm.
to say, I'm going to just stop. That can be one of the harder steps to take, is just to do that pause and then say, I'm going to look around. We've done a lot of work together where at the end of it, I'll say, tell me 5 things you physically can see, 5 things you physically can hear, 5 things you physically feel. That's a pause, is so you can get regrounded to move forward.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's
And
what pausing is, right?
yeah, yeah. And in that pause, there's so much that can happen.
Yeah.
Being able to move yourself from point A to point B in that mental process, I want to take a moment and talk about what happens when you go through all of that and you do all of those things
Mm.
and you get to the end and it's still not working as well as you'd like. What happens there?
What's here now?
Tell me more about that.
We always want the quick fix, take the pill, drink the drink, do the meditation, everything's okay. We didn't get here in a day. We're not going to get out of it in a day. We have scripts, we have stories, we have paradigms, we have beliefs that are false, that we've been raised with, given to us by society. If we're struggling, we may be running a script that we don't know is even there. So if you're having a barrier you can't get past, that's my question to ask. What's here now? What am I believing that's holding me back? And the question next is this true? Answers to everything in our life is within. We have an internal guide, we have an instinct, but sometimes we forget to trust it. So when you go out in the observer, you're taking on that instinct role to be able to see everything and make good choices with everything you know, with all your tools, with all your skills, and with all your abilities. However, when you want to learn more strategies and more tools and tricks and awarenesses, because sometimes we don't know the answer to ask ourselves, we can reach out to a coach, a therapist, your doctor, a friend, to say, hey, I'm struggling. I just kind of don't know where to go. That's okay too. But we don't need anything outside of ourselves to get through each and every moment. When you realize the answers are within, there's so much more peace. There's so much more comfort and a whole lot less confusion.
And when we get to the point where we're like, maybe I need help, I need help working the process sometimes, like, so when we get to that point, I want to address something that happens with a lot of people when they get to that point, the feelings and the barriers that they run into with asking for that help.
Are you talking about like self-judgment?
Yeah. So like when a person reaches a point where, they're like, this is it, I can't do this myself. But if I ask for help, that means I'm inadequate. I'm not, like they told me to work this process to recognize my barriers, to, come up with new strategies, all those things. I'm struggling with that. I need more help, but I don't dare ask because it's frightening to be able to touch what might come next. I know that there are a lot of people who are afraid to reach out and get help when they need
But
it.
it is work, no doubt.
It is work.
It's not easy. Like I know lots of people that tried therapy and they're like, this is bullshit. And then they never go back. Why? Because they made them touch something they didn't want to talk about at parties.
Yeah, absolutely. Or I
And I
mean,
think we don't matter. I think that's a very strong running script for many, many, many people.
well, I think sometimes too that we stop, like when we hit that wall, we stop and we say, I can't do this, right? And I think some people are afraid to think that they might be empowered to do something about it because it's easier just to say, I can't do this, right?
I feel good to say I can't do this.
It's easier than doing the work sometimes, I think.
But
And in
that's
the end,
suffering.
it's hurtful. And in the end, it doesn't do you any good. But in the process of going through it, I think a lot of times that's where it stops rather than where it starts. And
It's the moment where it starts. That's brilliant.
yeah, because it's like the moment you hit a wall, that's where the work starts, right? But you can do it.
I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, like the welcoming, allowing yourself to be honest. I'm afraid I'm going to lose my job. I'm not going to have money. Well,
Yeah.
how could you even begin to look at a problem when you're that deep in it? Because
Yeah.
that's what you think is actually happening right now is you've lost your job, you have no money, you're going to be on the streets. Like you've
That's
gone
what
to
we
these,
do. That's where we go, right? We're on
right?
it's like, oh, I'm unemployed. It's
Yeah.
over. I'm unemployed.
And how could you dare pick up a mouse or a keyboard and say, I'm going to be all inventive and solve this problem? You can't. It's impossible because you're so down the rabbit hole. But when you call it out, what happens to it? It disappears because you realize it's not true.
Yeah, and it comes back to naming it, like we've talked about so many times with once you see it, you can't unsee it. And when you name it and you say, this is fear,
Yeah.
knowing that it's fear and naming it as fear rather than hurt or rejection or all the other things that go through my mind. I'm a bad person. He hates me. I'm never going to da 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 da. I'm afraid.
I'm afraid.
Is more honest than any of those other things that came out. And when you can say, I'm afraid, then you can look at it and say, am I really in danger or am I safe? And if I am safe, how do I start doing the work to make sure that I can move forward?
Can I be brave enough to observe
Yeah.
the whole story, right? The whole thing. And
And it
like let
does
go
take
of all
bravery.
that stuff and go, okay, all that stuff's just an emotional response. What is now one step I can do to move forward? What does this project, like you said, when you said, I'm like, what does it mean when you do the project? You're sitting there, you got the tea and the music. What happens? What's here? And you're like bored. As soon as you call out, that was actually the trigger
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah,
created all this other stuff. So all this stuff ain't real.
exactly.
What's actually here is that you're bored and you don't
Right.
want to deal with that. In fact, you're bored. But that's how crazy the mind can get. And ADHDers, it can be a real party in
Oh,
there.
it sure can. It sure can.
I think personal development, it's a word we hear a lot, that and mindfulness. It's called work for a reason. But do you matter?
Yeah.
Each and every one of us matters. To do the work is the greatest gift you can give yourself so that you can live your best life. Fear will be here. But when you work with someone like Janine, myself, other people that work with emotional wellness and intelligence, helping people with RSD, ADHD coaches, Janine has a great list of tons of them. They will help you to hold that pain, those difficult comments of being so fearful. That's a story, that's a script that comes back from somewhere else, not in this moment, because in this moment, you're safe. You're not in immediate danger, and you're just listening to me and Janine. So make a decision, do the work. It's worth it. And so are you.
Lovely. I love the idea that hopefully people will take away from this session the fact that they can do this work on their own in a safe way and really help themselves. And to be able to say, okay, I've met a barrier, but I'm going to grow from this. I'm going to be stronger afterward because now I have another technique, another strategy, something else that I've learned about myself. Like I learned that my job was boring me to death, right? And I didn't really realize that coming in. So, but also the importance of being able to ask for help when you're struggling with doing that process. And so I just want to say, great conversation. I want people to understand that coaching, when you're coaching me through that, there is no way to completely understand what that does until you've done it yourself. Because looking at it from the outside, it's just you asking me questions, right? But being in here,
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. And
So,
it's very important working with a coach and finding the right coach is that they never leave you broken. They leave you feeling grounded, secure, peaceful, accepting and being courageous in your life. If someone leaves you broken, they're probably not the right coach. Because there's a lot of energy that moved through your system in the last about 45 minutes. And I have to be strong enough to hold that with you. And if your coach isn't strong enough to hold that with you, you need to find a better coach. And if you can't hold your client stuff, you need to get more education.
so Cheryl,
Yeah.
as we're closing out this podcast, because I feel like this podcast has been very different from a lot of the ones that we've done because we've actually demonstrated some coaching in here. What thoughts do you have that you would like to share about this process today?
I think that there is a massive amount of thoughts, beliefs, and emotions that get activated by a single event. They can be very intense, they can be very harmful, but a lot of them aren't real. And this work allows you to be with what is, not what we imagine it to be because of old stuff. We all have trauma, we all have hurts, we all have harms. But that doesn't mean that's what's happening right now. I think that's important because I think that a lot, especially younger people, they want people to give them advice. I want them to tell them, okay, say this, do this, act this way, do that. We actually don't need to do any of that.
Yeah.
That's the script that we're trying to get rid of, that you need my support. So for me, this has always been about breaking down stories, breaking down beliefs, breaking down false paradigms, and releasing that stuff because it doesn't serve you. And I saw you let go of a ton of stuff, even though this was a scenario, which I always love. That's my takeaway as a coach when I see people have aha moments and see them release stuff. That's my takeaway.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you again for being on the show today. I think that this was very intense and
Mm.
a really good podcast. And we'll have you back again. And of course, if you like what you're hearing, if you enjoy our content, make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.